My name is Jolie Higazi. I have been talking about recording my coming out story all month, and it is June 30th. So I guess I'm about to get it done. As you can see, this I did not prepare very well for this. I know that if I try to make everything perfect, I'm never going to do this. And I only have so many hours left in the day. So don't mind the mess that's all around. I am just sitting down and wanting to tell my story. And really, the goal of this is to share one more story that someone might relate with, maybe some parts of, to make sure they know they're not alone. For so much of my life, I felt so alone, and I didn't even realize it because it was just my default and my normal state that I just thought that was normal. And after now finding connection and connection with myself, connection with other people, and this degree of self-acceptance, I've realized how connection is the most powerful thing that we have, is being able to connect with each other. And even if you live a world across from me, right, across the globe, or have a totally different story, right? Like I'm a cis white girl. I grew up in New Jersey. I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm 32. I'm a lesbian. Like somebody of a very different background can still relate with some of the things that I might have to share, and maybe might make you feel just that much less alone. So I don't really have I told myself I was going to write an outline. And what I realized with this crazy brain is that I just need to do it, and it doesn't need to be perfect for it to be helpful and impactful. So I'm going to share my story. There may be some parts that you identify with, some parts that you don't. But what I've learned is that regardless of the situation of what was actually going on, that you may not relate to, we can all relate with the same feelings that are going on underneath. We all share the same human experience of these range of feelings of joy and fear and loneliness and anger and disgust and embarrassment, and all of these things are very common. So even if you can't relate with the specific things that make up my story, I'm sure you can relate with some of the feelings underneath. And I'm sure this will be a multi-part series to dive deeper into some parts, but we'll just see what kind of comes out here and how that goes.
Mm.
So, what makes most sense for me in terms of where to start is when I came out, and then I'll probably take you backwards and forwards and all around. So, I came out as a lesbian when I was 19 years old. And uh, the only thing that really enabled me to come out, I would say, is that I got clean and sober about a year and a half prior to that when I was 18, and I found recovery. I really believe that without finding recovery, I might still be in some measure of denial of who I am, hating who I am, and not knowing why, and just repressed. And I was just such an angry person, and I was just not. I talked about connection being so powerful. I didn't have any connections with anybody, never mind with myself. So my coming out story and my recovery story, they kind of interplay with each other. But um, like I said, I came out when I was 19, and I guess let me take you back a little bit before that. Is I grew up in a household. My parents got divorced when I was about 5 or 6. I have two brothers. I'm right in the middle. Uh, Tomboy, since as long as I know, is like I wasn't really into wearing dresses and heels and makeup. My Some of my family would always get me like makeup for like Christmas and birthdays and things like that. And I was always wondering, I never really liked it, and I always thought, like, maybe it's just a matter of time before I grow into it, and they're just, like, giving me advance notice or something, like, preparing me, and I just never grew into it, and I never understood why they still got me those things. But, um, Yeah, I liked playing with, my brothers and with the boys in the neighborhood. I liked running around. I liked playing in the creeks and the little stream river and climbing trees and getting dirty in the dirt and I was an outside kind of kid and I didn't like dolls and things like that growing up. I was much more into adventure and building things and taking things apart and seeing how they worked. And that was more of my jam. And let's see. So when my when my parents divorced, when I was around 5 or 6, I was really attached to my dad. And my dad was more of like the lovey-dovey type, right? Like physical affection and things like that. And my mom was raising 3 kids as a single mom and, was just trying to like keep things going. And she did a great job. She was always working really hard and keeping food on the table. And there were plenty of toys and things and going to school and all of our activities and things like that. So she had her hands full. But I really like I gravitated towards my dad because he offered this physical affection that I really needed as a kid. And I guess at this point in time, let me fast forward a little bit, right? It came to be about 5th grade, 6th grade, when my dad started getting really into the church. And as my way of bonding with my dad and being able to spend more time with him and just, I guess, in some version of my mind, just like getting closer with him. And maybe it was a way of securing love from him, whatever it was, right? My kid like brain, I became super religious. And my brothers didn't so much. Like I was the one that like really latched on. So I was going to church multiple times a week. I was going to the youth group. I was going to the adult services. And you know how there's like multiple church services like on a certain like Sunday or something. So like some people can come early, some people came late. I would try to go to each one because I was like, what if I miss something? Well, what if there's a message here? I don't want to miss anything. And uh, I was very obsessive, which, no wonder I was, fell into addiction later, right? But like I was just obsessive and compulsive about anything that I got involved in. So I would go to all these churches, I would go to the adult prayer meetings. And this is all when I'm, I don't know, 12, 13. And it was obsessive, right? I went to purity seminars and I, told myself I'm saving myself for Jesus or for marriage and all these things. I was the one that was going to malls and handing out tracts to people and telling them like how to not go to hell. And, as part of this like really deep work that I was doing, I brought my Bible to school. I was like taping Bible verses on my like high school locker. Like I was in it. And as part of that culture that I was in, I also learned about gay people and how gay people are abominable. And in my mind, I just remember this one way that they put it, where it's like being gay and homosexual is equivalent to bestiality. It's just wrong above all measures and disgusting. And just there's no excuse for it. And it wasn't just like, let me have compassion for gay people, but it was like they are actively disgusting. And so I was actively against these people. And I also had all of these things plotted out for if I ever needed to get in conversation with someone to be able to, what's the word for it? When you're like needing to defend the Bible, defend scripture or whatever. I'm forgetting the word right now, but like I had all of my evidence and arguments and everything like all worked up so that I could talk to people and understand logically from the perspective of the Bible why it was wrong. And so I believed this, right? And at this point, I'm not thinking at all that like I'm gay. Of course not. Right. But I really wasn't. I was just trying to survive as a kid, growing up in a broken home, just trying to like fit in and find home in some place. Spend time with my dad. Didn't really have that many close friends. Um, I was just like a Jesus fanatic, really. And I like I said, so all of this time I'm internalizing all of this stuff about like what a sinner, um, not just gay people are, but that I am too, that like I needed to have you know, Jesus die and go through all this pain. It's because like I'm so dirty and I'm such a sinner myself. So like I really fell into that like really hard. And uh it was like I internalized a lot of guilt just for existing, just for being who I am. And this isn't even with me considering an idea of me being gay. It was just me as a person is such guilt-ridden, shameful, uh, just like this very disempowering. And anyway, I fell into this and then somewhere around between ninth grade and 10th grade, something snapped, right? I'm going through puberty at this point, and something clicked. Like I got in a fight with my dad at one point, and I left the church. And um it left like this big gaping hole, because all of a sudden, like it was like I had no purpose, right? Like I was busy before. I was reading Bible, I mean, scripture, needing to like pray, and like my whole life revolved around religion. And all of a sudden, it was like no, and uh, I was so depressed and so empty, and that's when I found drugs and alcohol. And that started, several years of me getting high and trying to just not feel. And I don't think it was specifically just trying to like not feel the religious guilt and stuff. It was like at this point, all of these other things were building up of like the feelings that I had from my parents' divorce and of just feeling so alone. And I had also gone through some trauma when I was a child. There was different types of abuse that I never really got to talk to anybody about, never really did any sort of healing or processing about. And all of a sudden, like all these feelings were showing up for me. And I found drugs, and they kind of like numbed everything down and like made it all okay. And that began a journey of a couple years for me of just being able to kind of be numb and just go through the motions. And in terms of my sexuality, I remember that sexuality in general, uh, I couldn't be sexual with somebody else unless I was somehow intoxicated or high, whatever it was. I had so much insecurity, even if it was with a guy, and primarily it was at first, right? Like I had so much fear and noise in my head and just like awkwardness and all of this, like just not feeling okay in my own skin, that like I would get drunk and blacked out whenever I was with somebody. And that was the only way I knew how to be sexual with somebody. So I didn't really think much of it. I didn't really have a boyfriend or anything like that. Even growing up in school, I just wasn't that kind of kid, I guess, that like had dates and stuff, I guess. Like even in high school, like I was just way too consumed with my own stuff to be thinking about anybody else. I was just like, I just wanted to get high. I didn't really care about connecting with other people in that way. So um, once I'm out of high school, right, like I'm able to experiment with men, and um I didn't really know what like that was just what I was supposed to do. And I was at least getting high or drunk. So it kind of just felt like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. And yeah, I had such fear around sex in general, never mind with a man or a woman, and attraction and all of that. But it was interesting, right? Because while this time period, right, where I'm like getting high and I'm getting drunk, I was hanging out with these two friends, and one of them, friends using buddies, and one of them was this bisexual girl. And I remember I was always kind of like just curious about her. Like maybe, I guess at that time I didn't fully process that like I kind of maybe had a crush on this girl, but I was like curious. And I would like ask her questions, and there was also like this bit of nervousness that I had around any sort of queer or gay people. And this really extends like my whole life is like I was always afraid and felt like this weird nervousness being around gay people with this fear that it was dangerous for me to be around them, thinking that gay people are just sex crazed people that if it's just me and them in a room, like I'm in trouble and they're going to try to impose themselves on me. So gay people scared me, right? In a lot of ways. And it was like, whoa, like stay back, that type of feeling, and almost like dehumanizing, like just seeing them as some sex crazed maniac that I needed to like protect myself from. And at this time when I'm getting high and there was this bisexual girl, it was the first time I'm just a little more like curious and like we're hanging out a lot. And I remember, there were times where I think like we flirted around a little bit, and like we almost like made out at one point, but I wasn't high, or wasn't high enough or drunk enough. And like my gravitation wasn't towards experimenting with her and going with like these feelings that I was having. It was like, no, we need to go get more uh drugs. And that was my process, with the thought process that like if I'm inebriated enough, then I can use that as an excuse for why I might have kissed a girl or something like that, right? Then it's less about me and I can blame it on the substance. And that was really just my attitude towards sex in general. Was I was so insecure and so afraid of like being a poor sexual partner, so insecure about like performance, that I was like, well, at least if I'm really messed up, I can blame it on the substance. And I can be like, I was really messed up last night. This is like how afraid I was, how lack of like in tune I was with myself, my body, like this lack of confidence or self-esteem, self-worth, all of that. I hope this is like followable. Uh, I'm not even gonna try to edit this because this will be, maybe I'll record like a more concise version at some point down the line. But or a longer version, who knows. So anyway, I'm getting high, and and at this point I'd gone through, how old am I at this point? I don't know, I'm in my 18, 17, 16-ish. Um, but this is about as far as I've gone with like trying to explore any element of my sexuality at this point. And I came into recovery. And funny enough, right? Like I came into recovery not because I was like, oh my God, I have a problem with drugs, I need to stop. It was just like I was at this spiritual emptiness at my life in that point, and this girl invited me to a meeting, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I had a crush on this girl. And that couldn't have been possible because I was totally straight. See like the aggression that comes there too, like a defensiveness, like totally straight. Like don't look at me. But she invited me to a meeting. I didn't really care, but I was like, whatever, I got nothing else going on. I want to hang out with you. Sure. And I went to meetings, and this started my recovery journey. And this is what I mean, how it all ties in is one of the first meetings I went to was an LGBT meeting. And I remember feeling so nervous walking into there and even just being in there, because it was like, are people thinking I'm gay just from sitting in here? Am I going to get the bug, right? Like, or are people going to try to attack me in the restroom or something? Like, these are the things I was thinking. But I went to that meeting and I remember I just heard people sharing like some really deep, like heartfelt things they were going through, like real feelings, feelings of pain and sadness and grief and loneliness. And at this point in my life, I didn't have any like real connections on an intimate, emotional level like that, where I was even aware that other people were feeling things that I was feeling. My only conversations was like, hey, where's the party at? Or, hey, I'm looking for this. Do you know anyone who has this? And if not, what do you have? Or, hey, will you cover my shift at work? Because I'm going to be messed up tonight. Or whatever, right? Like those are the only conversations. So walking into this gay meeting and then just having people talk, not even about sexuality, but just normal life stuff. This guy was talking something about his grandma and like something was so sad. And my heart just like split open and I felt like such empathy for him and such like connection with him. And uh, long story short, I ended up going back to that meeting over and over again. And I told myself that the reason I go to that meeting is because people are really open and vulnerable there. And it's just a safe place to be like really open and heartfelt. And uh yeah. And I did. I felt comfortable there because I kept going and nobody was ever any sort of inappropriate or weird or anything towards me. They didn't even make me like identify myself. Are you gay or not? Like I think they could just sense like I was such a this closeted angry kid that just had such a vibe of like don't fuck with me. Like leave me the fuck alone. And that was such my energy, right? So just me going and showing up, right, was big. And uh yeah, I ended up staying. And part of recovery and 12-step programs is you get a sponsor. And this is just another person in the fellowship who's been there longer than you, who can kind of like show you the ropes and be your friend and your guide. So there was a guy that went to that meeting, this older gentleman, he was in his 60s, the Spanish flamboyant gay man. And whenever he would share, I just always heard such wisdom from him that like I gravitated towards him. And I guess like he just felt safe for me, right? Also at this time, like I had a very hard time connecting with women in any way. It was so scary and intimidating and so not only like on an intimacy level of like just having close women friends, like I didn't have that. What I also didn't realize is I was processing a lot of like unprocessed trauma and resentment towards my mom for the divorce, and all of this other stuff. And uh so my feelings towards women were very complicated. And I much preferred um, being around men. So when this guy would share and he was there consistently, I really resonated with what he shared. And I went up to him one day and I asked him, will you be my temporary sponsor? And, you know, 13 plus years later, we're still working together on a temporary basis. That's the joke is like, we're still temporary. But the thing is, right, I look at like, why did I pick him? And I'm sure there was some part of me in that moment, a subconscious part of me that knew that maybe he could help me figure out what was going on inside of me with all of this like anger and angst and self-hatred that I was going through and coming out of the religious trauma and trying to get clean and find recovery and then develop connections with like it was just so much and so confusing and my relationship with sex in general without drugs was so confusing. So I just was hoping that maybe he could help me just figure out what was going on with me and help. And maybe as a gay man, he might be able to help me. This was not conscious on any level here. Like this was not a conscious thing. It was just like, hey, you seem pretty wise. just temporary. Can you help me out? And, we joke about it now where like from the get-go, he knew there were some things I was struggling with from, my sexuality perspective. Um, but what was so great was he really let me lead all of that conversation. He never pushed it or pressured me or questioned me. Like it really came about organically into, months and months, even, over a year into working together that we started to uncover through the recovery process. There's something called the fourth step where you really get to know yourself. And it was through that process that I started seeing like some of these patterns of self-hatred and feelings of attraction that were confusing because I thought how I felt towards men was attraction. And, so I say that to say he was just a safe place for me to come to. He didn't need to really push anything at all. And so, you know, up until this point in my life, I had met women that I felt a certain way about, where like I had like these like rumblings in my belly when I was around if there was like a pretty lady or just somebody that I really liked, just like enjoyed being around. But I never equated that to being what attraction was because it's kind of interesting when you think of it, right? As a kid, you're just raised and brought up that attraction is between a man and a woman. So the way that I figured I felt towards a man had to be attraction. It's hard to describe a feeling, right? Attraction, you want to be around them. And I did want to be around guys to play around and hang out and chat and go on adventures, whatever. That was the feeling I had towards men. It was something totally different than this like almost like pit of like nervousness that I felt around women. And I didn't really know how to make sense of it because no one teaches you, right? Like, oh, what are you feeling towards this and that? And this is what that's called. That's what that's called. They just assume that you're in a, heterosexual and a heteronormative world. And I think we've come a long way since that, as a culture and a society. But, I just assumed I was straight. And but I never had a boyfriend or anything like that. And I would always say that it's just because I haven't met the right guy and wasn't really all that interested. Uh like that prospect of like I already got everything I needed with guys, right? Like we would hang out and be friends, and that's all I really needed. Um, and at that point, once I was sober, like I didn't even want to have sex because sex was too scary if I wasn't somehow messed up. So I'm trying to also like I'm mindful of the time, and I'm like, do I want this to go on forever? And I don't. I think I'm getting somewhere. La la la. So at this point, right, I'm in college and I noticed myself opening up a little bit more now that I'm not like getting high and stuff like that, dealing with some of my issues. I noticed myself like paying a little bit more interest in some women, but again, not really knowing what that was or what it was about. There were moments where now looking back, I can see all these signs. Like there was one time, like I had a huge crush on one of my teachers, this like English professor in college. And also I'm a writer, so it was like, oh my God, like we're writing. I love it. And she was just beautiful and like her energy was just anyway, I forgot how it happened, but eventually we ended up saying like, let's grab coffee. And it was like off campus. So in my mind, this was a date, right? And it was like, but not really a date because I'm not gay, but it was just like special enough that like she wanted to hang out with me. And that was enough to make me like totally sweaty and just like, oh my God, melting. But then also it like wasn't on a conscious level. So it is very confusing. It's like hard to really articulate the level of what was going on subconsciously and consciously and what I can see now looking back versus what I saw at the time. So if this is a little confusing and hard to follow, if you don't relate, just know that it was hard for me to follow as well. But anyway, I went on this date. I was so freaking awkward. I just remember I was like staring at her the whole time and um like I'm like still kind of embarrassed to this day of like I'm sure she was just trying to be supportive. And at some point during that coffee, she had asked, like, oh, are you connected with like the LGBT community, or no, what did she say? LGBT community or something on campus, the something group. And it was like a common phrase, but I was like, no, what's that? Like, and I think that's when she realized, like, probably like, oh, like, I don't know that I'm this way, that probably she could even see that, like, I think she was probably in the community and just trying to be supportive as a friend, and I totally misinterpreted. Um, and yeah, anyway, so I was just like totally not I was not like I was not in any sort of gay club or anything. Again, like I was very afraid in the normal world. And even in the recovery world, like if anybody asked me why I went to that one gay meeting, it was just because that's where I had my recovery. Um, and but every now and then, like I'd have somebody that would like just like ask me casually, like, oh, like, are you gay? And I remember whenever somebody would ask me that, or like, oh, are you a lesbian, or insinuating anything that I'm a part of that community, I would get so defensive, and I would uh, vehemently deny it. And I would also need to like dig out information from them of like, what made you think that I was? And I was like so insecure. And I was like, what is it that I'm giving off subconsciously that's telling you that I might be part of that community? Because then I need to fix that. Is it like the way that I'm dressing or talking, or like, what is it? And they would never be able to give me like a clear answer, right? Which is funny because now, as someone who's in the gay community, a lot of times, right, like some, not 100%, but like you can tell when someone's in the community, and a lot of times it's not like clear cut. It's like a vibe. And but it's funny because I so wanted to figure out what was it they were seeing so I could explain it away for why that wasn't the case. Very defensive, very defensive. But I'll fast forward, right? To like the actual coming out journey for me was, like I said, I was working on my fourth step, working in this recovery process. And my sponsor, his name's Daniel, he was so supportive of that time and me realizing that like I had so much confusion. And basically my thing was like, if I could have clear cut evidence that I am gay, then I'll believe it. Like, but there's not evidence. Like, how do I know that it's real? And like I was looking for evidence, I guess, and I guess my first step in the coming out process was just acknowledging, being able to like even accept that like I'm not gay, but if hypothetically I had some sort of cosmic evidence that that was so sure, then I could be okay with it. Like that was it. Isn't even like accepting that like if I'm gay, then it's okay. It's like no, 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 no. Like if in this alternate reality there was a way to prove that I was gay, then okay. Like okay, then I could accept that. But then the search was looking for evidence, right? And at this point, I started getting a little more comfortable around the gay community through that meeting. So, when there were people that were anywhere along the spectrum, in whether they're bisexual or gay or trans or whatever, I just started like picking their brain and asking them questions, right? Like, how did you know? And I remember like this one girl was bisexual, and I was like trying to talk logic to her, and I was like, technically, isn't it harder being bisexual than being gay? Because like bisexual, like you're not gay or straight, you're kind of like straddling, and you don't really fit somewhere. Versus gay, at least you belong somewhere. Like, wouldn't it be easier to be bisexual? So I'm like trying to talk to myself, right, about like what's the easier path for me to be. And I remember she answered with like maybe it's harder, but it doesn't really matter because it's not, it's like who you are is who you are. You don't choose it. And I remember that really resonated for me where I was like, oh, I'm trying to like almost choose like what's the easiest route for me to like ease into this world, knowing I belonged somewhere there, but uh trying to like logic localize it. And she's like, no, there's no logic. It's just who you are. And it might be hard. It might be easier or whatever, but like you are who you are. And that really struck with struck me. And, I would just have the more conversations like this. And, eventually I remember having, so my sponsor would also have me, just like reading literature, reading other people's coming out stories. Um, and that got me a little incorporated, and also, right, so like I know, I'm sorry, this is all over, but at my sponsor's house, he's like very eclectic, right, and he has all of this like art on the wall. Some of them are like photos of like gay men that are like posing in certain artistic ways, and he had like one or two shots of like a woman that was like naked but like posing, and it was like very artistic. And I remember every time I went to his house, I would always comment on like, "Oh, it's a nice picture." And I would point to the one of the woman. And that was big for me. Like even just to acknowledge that like me directing my gaze towards this like naked woman on the wall, like just to acknowledge that was huge, right? So things like that. And then we would watch different like gay films and gay movies and stuff at his place. It's almost like I couldn't even watch it like at home. Like it really felt like he offered a safe place where I could explore that. I could comment on the thing on the wall. I could watch a movie that featured like some lesbian storyline or a lesbian couple. And I was just like letting myself be exposed to this thing that felt somehow both scary and terrifying, but also natural. It was very confusing. And so he was the place that I could, start to incorporate this. And I started thinking more. And I remember one conversation I had with my sponsor that's just so stuck with me. And I'm fighting it, right? He's watching me fight with myself. I'm like, no, I can't be, right? Like I need evidence, and there's no way that because I'm not this or like I was just so angry, and I was so like fighting this thing, and also this internalized homophobia of like I can't be that gross, disgusting human being that's equivalent to like someone committing bestiality and going to hell. And so all of this is just like at 18, 19 years old, I'm just like, ah. And I remember he's watching me like fight with myself, and but he let me like talk things out. And there was one conversation we had where he said, "You're hiding the most beautiful part of who you are." And like that just so hit me of like, this is beautiful. Like, uh, and it was such a reframe for me of like, oh, uh, wow, like, and the most beautiful part of who I am is like this is something I have to offer the world of like who I am. And uh, and I was so confused, right? Because I thought sexuality is something you do in private with one person or whoever, right? And it's like, how does that affect the 90% of my day or my relationships, right? Like it's something private. But what I realized is that uh it's not just 1/10 of who I am. It's not an action, right? A sexual act. My sexuality is me being able to embrace who I am in all aspects of my life. So eventually I was able first I came out with the idea that if I can find proof, then, okay, I'll accept it. And then I was like looking for proof, and eventually I like just threw up my hands and I'm like, will there ever be enough proof? I'll have an excuse for everything, but like fighting really hard on this. And eventually I guess I like just like accepted it. And I came out to some friends, and it was so beautiful. I had such beautiful people supporting me and encouraging me in my journey. Those early like coming out stories were just so beautiful. I told my grandma was one of the first people, and she was like, yeah, duh, like duh. She's like 70 something. And I'm like, wait, what? You knew? And I told my mom, and my mom reacted like, yeah, like I kind of knew. And I did not expect that from her. But then I came out to my dad, and my dad was the one who at the time took it in my view, like the most harsh or negative, where he said, I still love you. I just don't think God agrees with it. And over time he's definitely softened his view. We still don't really talk about it, but at one point, like I had a partner for a while, and he was very loving and accepting towards them, and treated them like family. So he's come a long way with that, and I know he loves me. And so anyway, that was like my coming out process there, and yeah, well, this is kind of like where, it doesn't quite, well, it's definitely a happy ending. But this is where I'm probably gonna have to like segue into like a video too. But, I came out in April of 2020. Oh no, not 2020. Oh my God. 2012. 2012. 12 years ago. Wow. And I'm a new gay. I'm 19. I'm about to be 20. And I got into a relationship within like 2 months of that. And I got into a relationship with someone who was a bit older than me, 9 years older than me, who was, a lesbian, much longer than me. So it's almost like I like leaned on her experience. And long story short, like that ended up being a very unhealthy, uh, dysfunctional, abusive relationship that I stayed in for the bulk of my 20s, right? We stayed together for almost 8 years. And uh, there's so much to unpack. We'll have to do like a separate video or something about like relationships in general. But I look at myself now, and by the way, right, relationships over. I'm in a best version of myself I've ever been. Right, I'm healthy. I'm free. I've dealt with a lot of that trauma. I'm in the best place of my life now. Right, but at that time, I was like a new baby gay. Right, and I was just I had not been in a serious relationship before. I I didn't have like some deep self-worth and self-esteem. So, I was a little baby, really, and I was like very susceptible. And especially me getting with somebody who was so much older. Um, it led to a lot of manipulation, a lot of gaslighting, and I had no concept of like what a healthy relationship is, or what healthy boundaries are, or anything like that, right? So, I mean, the first year or two, right, was like great. I'm like, like experiencing this joy of like being in a relationship, and I get to say this is my girlfriend, and we go to Pride together, and um, at some point we move in together, and, have a life together. And I'm like, wow, like this is so beautiful. But what I didn't realize all that time, right, and continuing on is like this like degrading part to like my self-worth, and this controlling nature that was there from, this person who had a lot of unhealthy tendencies and qualities, a lot of like narcissistic qualities, a lot of undealt with trauma of their own. And, I just really wanted to fix her or help her. And again, right, coming back to, I guess this is going more in the relationship side. We'll wind up around here though, and we can pick back up. But, coming back to like early childhood for me, right? Like my parents divorced, and that was the worst thing. So for me, my concept going into a relationship was, uh, a successful relationship is just one that neither person quits. So even after a couple of years, right, when I'm starting to just like, like some things just don't really feel right, or things that are, being told to me, or there's just like meanness and like this emotional like volatility, and it's just volatile, and not respectful of my recovery, and like a lot of like these little things, right? The thousand paper cuts that I just kept telling myself that I was the problem, and that a successful relationship is just one where you don't quit. So I stuck it out. And, fast forward, we can go into the relationship more some other time, right? I was 27, about to be 28. My timeline. End of 2019. End of 2019, early 2020 is when we finally split. And I have to say that was like at that point in my time in my life, that was the hardest thing I ever gone through. I'd never experienced heartbreak and, um, that sort of thing, and I did after that relationship ended, um, I was grieving, it was also COVID, but then I started, like, questioning my sexuality again of, w like, "Am I really gay?" Right? This has been, like, 8 years, right? Some formative years of, like, my 20s, that I was just with this one person, and it wasn't a healthy relationship, and it wasn't, I was well, it was another video, right? But, I, questioned myself after that relationship, and I ended up going on some dates with guys, and, it didn't take me too long to realize, like, "What am I doing?" Like, "No, I don't like guys, I just don't like mean women." Like women who are not emotionally mature and able to be kind and hold space for me and emotionally present, things like that, right? So I had to distinguish a little bit, which it took me a little bit of time, but I landed on my feet. Thank goodness, right? And since then I've been in loving some loving relationships with other women, and it's been beautiful. um, and, part of that journey is like also like me learning about myself and coming to different degrees of acceptance with who I am, my sexuality. And, it's through relationships with other people that we learn more about ourselves, whether romantic or friendship. And I've definitely learned so much about myself through the romantic relationships I've had and the friendships I've had. And to the point where today I have close, intimate relationships with other women in my life. And by intimate, I don't mean sexual, I mean emotionally vulnerable, where these people can see me unfiltered, I can see them unfiltered, and we can support each other in a beautiful way. And it makes me so grateful because I never thought I would be able to have a close relationship with a woman, period. Never mind close friendships with women where there wasn't an attraction or sexual component to it. And the fact that I can have that today is just mind-boggling, right? It's so beautiful. Some of my best friends are women, and it's so beautiful, right? And I have men that are in my life as well that it's so great. But just as I close up here, right? What I realize is that my sexuality, embracing who I am, isn't just what I do with a partner, it's how I just show up in the world. It's my ability to not need to fit into like heteronormative stereotypes of needing to maybe dress or act a certain way in order to be attractive by normal gender norms, right? I realize like I'm not that, I'm still like that tomboy that grew up in a lot of ways, right? And I'm like, you're probably not gonna find me in a dress. Like, it'll be a rare occasion if you do, and I wear sneakers, not heels. And, you know, um, to, like, realize that, like, all of that's okay, and I don't need to judge my worth based on how attractive, the opposite sex might perceive me as. And I think that's something we don't even realize that a lot of us deal with. Straight, gay, anything is like there's so much of our worth of like, do men think you're beautiful? Or are men hitting on you or whatever? And it's like, do you have a partner? And it's like that's how we judge our self-worth. And it's just it's sad and it's terrible. And if anything, my sexuality has given me the ability to just be okay more with me and not need to worry about whether a guy or a girl finds me attractive, but more like tuning in of like what feels right inside of me. What clothing do I wear that makes me feel most comfortable? Um, how do I get to act, right? Like I don't have to be like I don't have to talk in a high pitched tone or something, or like feel small or gentle, like very like like I'm able to speak up. And like today I found more of that that mix, right? Of like what the most authentic form of Jolie looks like out in the wild when she's buying groceries and when she's going to the post office and just like normal daily things that it might be hard to really understand if you're not in the community, but it's just like by hiding away that one part of me, I was hiding like this deeper part of everything of who I was. It wasn't just like your sexuality is wrong, it's that you are wrong. And then that wrongness showed up, that shame showed up in every area of my life. Whereas today, I can accept the sexuality part, my gender expression, all of this. And it means that I'm able to accept myself as a whole, right? It shows up everywhere. So, I don't really know how to wrap this up. I hope this is helpful for somebody. Also, like part of what I do now is I get to work with people. I'm a life and relationship coach, and like I get to work with people through these specific challenges, not just in the gay coming out process, but all different things. But I think that's also why it's important to hear my story. Is like I've been there. I've been through the ringer of it, the religious trauma, the sexual trauma, the abuse, the needing to heal from unhealthy relationships, not knowing how to set boundaries and accept myself, like all of these things in recovery, right, is all part of my journey. So I'm just working on piecing that out a little bit, and maybe I'll post more videos here on different segments just to offer some support and encouragement for people who might be struggling in some specific area. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to shoot me a message or a comment, and I'll do my best to answer that. I really, I'm glad to share my story if that's helpful. I have no qualms about it because I've experienced so much freedom that I want other people to be able to experience that. So again, my name is Jolie, and I'm sure this won't be the first time that you hear from me. Happy Pride.